Jason Bateman is nominated for another 3 Emmys this year. I'm Riley Chow of Gold Derby, and I would say my least fruitful line of questioning as an interviewer is asking people to judge themselves. But you constantly direct and produce yourself, so I have high hopes here. Over the last 3 years, I don't think I've seen an interview with an Ozark cast or crew member where they didn't go out of their way to praise Jason Bateman as a collaborator, as a boss, as a human being. You've been in this industry your whole life. You've clearly picked up on how people should be treated and managed. What do you think you're doing differently?
I'm not sure. It's not a difficult thing. I'm sure you would do the same if you were, lucky enough to be in a position of leadership. I think most people instinctually would want to create an environment that is collaborative and that is kind and respectful. And I mean, just for no other reason than you just want a nice, pleasant place to work. The fact that it also yields great contributions from really talented people is something that people should, consider as well. So I appreciate people saying that. I appreciate you saying it, but it really is no big heroic feat, I think, to just follow one's instinct to treat people kindly,
I think maybe the first thing that I noticed about your Ozark performance is how deliberate it was in its restraint. You hear about a show where somebody's directing themselves and you kind of expect showboating. But, Marty is much quieter than Wendy, than Ruth, Ben, Darlene. How did you come to this decision to calibrate your performance at this level?
Well, I think it's first and foremost, I think it's just sort of in the fabric of the show that the character of Marty is somebody who is, along with Wendy, really kind of the eyes and the ears for the audience into this abnormal situation. And so I'm just trying to be true to that, I suppose, just kind of try to be a normal, everyday Joe that is acting a bit like you or I would, except for the light lawlessness. He's somebody who is he thinks he's a little bit smarter than he actually is. So I also think that's sort of common with a lot of us as well. And the moment that you find out you're not quite as smart as you thought you were, usually ends up being a moment that can either bring drama or comedy. And so I like playing that character in both comedy and drama because it's in comedy, it's usually when you're losing your dignity, it ends up being pretty funny. In drama, it's when you're losing your sense of safety and well-being, and it can be kind of tragic and scary. So I like playing that guy, and I also just my taste in acting right now is I really appreciate actors that do as little as possible, as opposed to some actors, are fantastic at being big and playing these eccentric characters. I'm just not one of those actors. I just don't have the talent or the interest or skill set or whatever it is. I really gravitate towards sort of the naturalistic style nowadays. So I love that this character lends itself to that.
I think along those lines, there's that 4th episode this season titled Boss Fight, where you get kidnapped and tortured. Over at Gold Derby, we're always trying to think about which episode are they going to submit to the Emmys as their acting showcase. That one seemed like such an obvious one because it's such a departure for Marty. He's really going through it. Instead, you actually submitted the 6th episode titled Su Casa Mi Casa, which does have that opening therapy scene that I know you're really proud of. Can you speak about what part of that episode struck a chord with you?
To be honest, I asked our head writer, our showrunner, Chris Mundy, what he thought. I'm just not good at picking an episode, and so I really left it all up to him. I didn't really know when he said episode 6. I was like, okay, I honestly couldn't remember which was what, and I don't know. I appreciate and respect any award show, any group that comes together to vote for things. It just makes me uncomfortable to pursue it overtly. And part of picking an episode, I guess, is a pretty overt practice. It's strategizing, and I don't know. It made me a little uneasy. So I kind of just deferred to him, and I hope that whoever is voting is watching the whole season. And again, as you said, my character is sort of, his job is to really be the portal for the audience and not really try to swing too hard for tall fences with acting scenes. And I think that there's other actors that play louder, flashier parts, and perhaps that'll warrant the trophy. But I don't know. I'm proud of the whole show and everything that the cast is doing and the crew is doing, and to be a part of this ceremony is and has been a real honor. So I'm just happy to get this far, truly.
All right, I do still have one more Emmy submission question.
Sure.
The directing categories at the Emmys have an additional rule that others don't have, in that you can't submit yourself, or you can't be on the ballot multiple times, even if they're for different shows. So you won the directing Emmy last year for Ozark. This year you didn't submit your directing on Ozark because you were submitting the pilot of The Outsider instead. And now, seeing as you won last year, you might have been, the default front runner to win again this year. I feel like I know exactly why you submitted The Outsider in its place, but I want to hear it from you.
Well, you tell me if you guessed right. Really the reason that I chose The Outsider is because it is I think it because it's the first episode of the show, a pilot episode. There are a lot of things that were sort of a little bit trickier than the two episodes that I directed on Ozark, and maybe it was trickier because it was different. Maybe Ozark's just incredibly comfortable for me now. Maybe those episodes were super challenging as a director. My lens was a little bit more towards Outsider, just because it was. I don't know. I thought there were a bunch of directing things I was really proud of that we all pulled off over there. And so in addition to that, having, as you said, won for Ozark last year, I felt like, well, we've had some great directors through there this year, and I think it would be more fair for me to kind of submit Outsider and have all the oxygen available for those other directors, and it worked out really nicely for Ben Seminoff and Alex Sakharov, the two nominations that we got. And so I'm disappointed that Outsider didn't get that nomination, and in addition to some of the other nominations that I thought the show was worthy of. But again, just having this conversation, it's nice that it's in the conversation, that people saw Outsider. I'm really proud of it, and in addition to all the viewing that we got on Ozark.
Yeah, I feel
was that what you thought?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Yeah, I feel like the Emmy voters might be catching up on The Outsider now. Yeah, so it's August now. The Outsider is the most watched show that HBO has aired in the last year. I know that it's based on the novel of the same name, and you exhausted that IP in the first season. But Stephen King has actually published a sequel in the form of a novella, plus you have that mid-credits cliffhanger in the finale. HBO has made a point to call it a drama series instead of a limited series most of the time. So basically, where is the announcement of the second season?
Truly, you'd have to ask HBO that. I'm not sure of the conversations that they're having in-house about a possible second season. I haven't been updated on that lately, and perhaps I will get an update tomorrow or the next day. So our timing might just be a little off, with respect to this interview. But I'm sure it's something that they're considering, and a bunch of great people on that show. So I hope that there is a second season.
I interviewed your camera operator, Ben Seminoff, a few days ago. It seems like a factor in you wanting him on Ozark, and I guess The Outsider, was that he had shot the night of before that. He said that you talked extensively about making that show. And then on The Outsider, you actually teamed up with a whole bunch of people who made the night of. So I'm wondering, what would you say particularly influenced Ozark regarding the night of? And was it much more of an influence than other shows?
Top of the Lake was a big influence for me for Ozark. The Night of was a big influence for me for Outsider. I mean, I think in both instances, both references are similar in that there's just a real there's such a specific environment visually and musically that those two shows, Top of the Lake and The Night of, drops the viewer into, so that they are conditioned to receive all of the really incredible writing and performances that both those shows brought. You know, you need to set the table for the meal you're going to put in front of the audience, and if it's, you know, if it's a checkerboard sort of placemat, you're expecting kind of, you know, fried chicken or burgers or something. If it's linen, you're expecting, you know, some sort of a different type of meal. So you've got to kind of set the audience in the right place so that, you know, if you put some incredible filet mignon on a red checkerboard thing, the audience might, or the eater might think, oh, this is the worst pizza or fried chicken I've ever had, but it's a great filet mignon. They're just not in the right mood for it. So sort of a weird analogy to say that there was some specifics to The Outsider as well as Ozark, that there needed to be the proper visual component and musical component so that the audience is in the right mood to take them into the world that I was trying to put them in.
I was looking at the credits when The Outsider came out, and it felt like you really assembled this all-star crew. At this point, you have such respect, you know, as an actor, as a director, and a producer in both TV and movies. It feels like you can kind of get anyone you want to some extent, and anyone will want to work with you. So when you're in that position of power, how do you weigh going with people like Leo Trombetta and Igor Martinovic, who are guaranteed to deliver excellent work just because of, you know, their resumes, versus taking a risk on people who are just as talented, but, you know, because of their race or gender, haven't had the same opportunities to prove that?
Well, that's a great point. I certainly never look at race or gender as I'm doing my hiring as a bias, but you know, I have talked to some that suggest that perhaps I should, and that I should only look at those that are in a minority group. And it's not a terrible idea, obviously. It's something that we look at, that we try to implement as much as possible there on Ozark and as well as Outsiders. As far as directors go, you know, unfortunately there aren't as many minority directors as there are non-minority directors, and we need to do our part to try to populate that pool so that it better matches what our society is. So we're trying to do what we can on Ozark and on Outsider as far as there's a shadow program that I started to try to get people of minority folks that are looking to get into directing, so they can come and they can observe and they can start to get the experience and get into the pool of consideration, and have them not be a rookie right out of college, so that they can get the proper consideration. And it can be a little bit more apples to apples when they're trying to compete for a job against somebody that may have been doing it for 20, 30 years. It's a little unfair, and people, I think, are willing to hire those without a lot of experience, but they're less comfortable hiring those that have zero experience. So we're trying to do what we can to try to populate the pool so that maybe in a couple of years or however long it's going to take, there are more people to choose from, because those that have experience and all the qualifications, they get snapped up immediately. So it's tough.
All right, and finally, I've heard that you're not directing on Ozark this coming season, but I just wanted to clarify if you meant, you know, both 4A and 4B, because I would at least think that you would want to do the series finale.
Yeah, you know, I was supposed to do, as I always do, the first two episodes, but as we started to get into, you know, looking at some of the protocols and the guidelines for COVID, I realized that as a producer, it probably wouldn't be smart to have the actor also directing, because as a director, you're exposed to, you know, location scouting and production meetings and all of these opportunities to become sick. If one of the cast members gets sick, we all have to stop for weeks. If a crew member gets sick, they do get to maintain their salary. I'm making sure of, but we can hire a replacement while they are quarantined. With an actor, obviously, you can't do that. So I just thought it was smarter for me to not direct right up front until we get our protocols and guidelines in place and establish a safe environment. And then perhaps later on in the season, I mean, we are booking and scheduling our directors now, so I want to be sensitive to that too. I don't want to book somebody and say, yeah, you know, by the way, I want to direct that episode. So I haven't really got into the weeds yet on that, but you're right. Directing the finale of the show would be something I'd really love to do, obviously. So I'm thinking about that, but you know, it looks like I'm going to be directing something right at the end of the show as well. And so there's a post-production tail to directing. So if I direct the final episode, then I can't start pre-production on the film I'm going to do. And so I want to be responsible to all parties. And as you can tell, I'm thinking about all of it now and trying to honor, you know, acting, producing, and directing, and figuring out what the smart recipe would be.
All right, Jason, well, thanks very much for taking the time to chat. We have many other Ozark interviews on our YouTube channel, and you can go to goldderby.com to make your own Emmy predictions.
Thanks, Riley, very much. And thanks for being so prepared. You asked some great questions. Thanks, buddy.